Hi, I'm Lyle Carver. My father looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've done enough damage. Don't show your face at the funeral." So I didn't. I stood outside the church in the rain while they buried the only man who ever believed in me. Weeks later, I found out they called it family loyalty. When they stole my inheritance, wiped my name from the will, and left me with nothing but a broken watch and silence. But silence has a way of recording everything. Now they're the ones being buried. Not in graves, but in secrets. And the worst part, that wasn't even the real betrayal. November mornings in Boston cut right through you, no matter how many layers you wear. The wind came sharp off the harbor, stinging my ears as I stepped out of the car. It was 10:12 a.m. when I parked in front of St. Bartholomew's Church, the same church that had buried every Carver before me. I sat there for a few seconds, gripping the white envelope on the passenger seat. Grandpa's eulogy. I'd stayed up all night writing it, reading it aloud to an empty room, trying to sound like the kind of man he would have been proud of. When I finally got out, I saw them all. My father's silver Mercedes was parked right up front, next to Damon's shiny black Escalade. Even the spot I used to take at family gatherings, the one near the side entrance, was blocked off by some cousin's rental car. I brushed my jacket, took a deep breath, and told myself, it's just a funeral. It's family. It's time. The church doors stood wide open, dark wood against the gray sky. I caught sight of a few faces inside, people I'd known since childhood. Some of them smiled politely before looking away, pretending to check their phones. Then I saw him. My father. Richard Carver Sr. He was standing right in the doorway, arms folded, coat buttoned tight like he was guarding the place. He didn't smile. He didn't even blink. "You're not coming in," he said flatly. I stopped halfway up the steps, still holding the envelope. "Dad, it's Grandpa's funeral." His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "You've done enough damage. Stay away." The words hit harder than the cold air. Behind him, I saw the casket at the front, the priest preparing his notes, the faint organ music filling the space I wasn't allowed to enter. My mother stood near the aisle, clutching her purse. Damon leaned in to whisper something to her, and she just nodded. She didn't even look at me. I tried to laugh it off. "I just came to say goodbye, that's all." He shook his head once. "You said your goodbyes the day you walked out on this family." For a second, I thought about arguing, telling him I never walked out, that I was pushed. But what was the point? No one there was listening. The silence behind him said everything, so I held out the envelope. "You can read it." He deserved better than this. My father didn't move. His eyes stayed on mine, cold, steady, familiar. The kind of stare that always meant you've already lost. A gust of wind came up from the street, snatched the envelope right out of my hand, and sent it tumbling down the steps. I watched it skip across the pavement until it disappeared under a parked car. I spent 35 years trying to earn a seat at that table, I thought. Turns out, it was never set for me. I looked past him one last time. My mother finally met my eyes. She looked guilty, just for a moment, and then turned away again. Damon's hand tightened on her shoulder like he owned the moment. That was it. I nodded once, keeping my voice even. "Got it." No one followed. No one called my name. The sound of the wind filled the space where family should have been. I walked down the steps slowly, careful not to look back. My shoes scraped against the stone, echoing in the empty parking lot. When I reached my car, I could still hear the faint bells of the church starting to ring. I sat behind the wheel, resting my forehead against the steering wheel for a long minute before starting the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw the church doors closing. My reflection overlapped with the cross on the front of the building. For a moment, it looked like I was nailed to it. "Guess I wasn't family after all," I muttered. The bells stopped, replaced by that thick kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I started the car. As I pulled out onto Tremont Street, I glanced at my wrist. My watch had stopped 2 days ago, 3:17 p.m., on the dot. I hadn't had the heart to fix it. I laughed under my breath. Even time's done with me. The road stretched ahead, lined with bare trees bending under the wind. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Behind me, the church door clicked shut, a sharp sound that cut through everything else. It stuck in my head. I didn't know then that I'd hear that same sound again months later under very different circumstances. By the time I reached the corner, my phone buzzed in the cup holder, an unknown caller. I let it ring out, probably a telemarketer. When it stopped, a voicemail icon popped up. I hesitated before hitting play. A man's voice came through, professional but urgent. Mr. Carver, this is attorney David Green. It concerns your grandfather's estate. You'll want to hear this. I stared at the phone for a few seconds before tossing it onto the passenger seat. The call I ignored that day would change everything. That voicemail replayed in my head long after I'd driven away from the church. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, the sun was already slipping behind the skyline. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, the phone still resting on the seat beside me. The lawyer's voice echoed again. Calm, professional, like he didn't know he was dropping a bomb. Inside, my apartment felt smaller than usual. The walls seemed to hold the day's cold, and the single light in the kitchen cast everything in a dull yellow. I dropped my keys on the counter, poured myself coffee, and realized it had gone bitter sitting in the pot all morning. I drank it anyway. It tasted like burnt hope. I sat down on the couch, thumb hovering over the voicemail. I listened again. Mr. Carver, this concerns your grandfather's estate. You'll want to hear this. For a few seconds, I just stared at the phone. Then I hit call back. The line rang 3 times before a man picked up. Samuel Green, Law Offices of Green Wexler. His voice had that tone lawyers get when they know they're about to ruin your week. Hi, this is Lyle Carver. You left me a message about my grandfather's estate? He paused like he was choosing his words. Yes, Mr. Carver. I was hoping to reach you before the service. There's been a development. What kind of development? The inheritance wasn't filed. I frowned. I don't follow. He sighed, the sound faintly static through the receiver. Your grandfather left a revised will. It was signed, notarized, and filed 2 months before his death. That version leaves the majority of his estate, around $15 million, to you. I almost laughed. That can't be right. It was, he said quietly, until yesterday. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean, until yesterday? Your father and brother submitted an older version of the will. The revised one has disappeared from our system, and the physical copy is missing from the vault. Missing? I repeated. The word hung there like fog. Yes, it appears someone accessed the files before we could process probate. The digital records were wiped. We still have the notary's log, but he hesitated. Without the document, it's their word against yours. I didn't say anything. I could hear the hum of my broken watch sitting on the coffee table, its second hand stuck in place, that same hollow tick that wasn't really ticking anymore. I'll email you what we still have, Green continued, but I'd advise you not to contact your family until we clarify the chain of custody. Too late for that, I thought. After we hung up, I sat in the silence, watching the daylight bleed out through the blinds. My mind went somewhere else, back to the porch in Cape Cod a year earlier. Grandpa had been sitting there, bundled in his old sweater, staring at the ocean. Lyle, he said that day, his voice rough but certain, you've got your head on straight. Don't let them make you doubt that. They don't listen to me, I'd told him. They never have. He'd smiled, faint but knowing. They will. Someday, silence will speak louder than all their shouting. The memory faded as fast as it came. That had been the week he asked me to bring some papers for signing. He'd joked about making things simple. Before Richard and Damon start arguing about my watch collection. Now I understood what he'd meant. I grabbed my coat and keys, drove across town to my office, a small architecture firm with my name on the glass door and little else to show for it. The place smelled like coffee and dust. I flicked on the lights, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. Emails piled up, most of them invoices and unfinished proposals. But one subject line stood out. You should have checked the safe before the funeral. No name, no signature, just that one line. I clicked it open. The body was blank. I read it twice, trying to slow my heartbeat. Then I typed back, "Who is this?" No response, not even a delivery receipt. The office was too quiet. I stood up and stared at the photo frame on my shelf. Grandpa and me at the marina, a fish we never caught hanging from the hook of a borrowed rod. Everyone else had walked out of the frame before the camera clicked. My father once told me, You were always the weak one, Lyle, always chasing fairness in a world that doesn't pay for it. I used to believe him. I used to think fairness was a luxury for people who didn't know better. Now it sounded more like a confession. Maybe fairness doesn't pay, I said out loud. But theft does. The words settled heavy in the room. I opened my inbox again, scanning for anything from Green, but nothing new had come in. I replayed his voicemail one more time, listening closer. That's when I heard it. Underneath his voice, faint, like background noise. A door closing, and then a whisper. It's done. I turned up the volume, replayed it again. There it was. Not static, not imagination. A door click, and those two words. My pulse picked up. Green's office was on the third floor of the Carver Associates building, the same floor as my father's office. I sat there, frozen for a moment until a chill ran through me. I didn't know it then, but the whisper wasn't random. It was recorded in my father's office. 3 days later, I was back behind the wheel, heading toward the Carver estate. The ocean air grew colder the closer I got to Cape Cod, the kind that smells like salt and memory. I told myself I just wanted to clear the air, maybe talk things out with my mother. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't driving toward peace. I was driving toward proof. The lawyer's voice had been looping in my head since that night. Your father and brother submitted an older version. The revised will disappeared. That sentence had burned itself into my thoughts. By the time I saw the old wrought iron gates of the family property, I wasn't thinking about conversation anymore. I was thinking about answers. The mansion looked smaller than I remembered, though maybe it was just me who had outgrown it. The shutters rattled in the wind, and the paint on the porch rail had begun to peel. The same railing I'd fixed once, years ago, under Grandpa's direction. Funny how something you build with care can crumble the moment you stop watching it. I parked a few houses down where the road curved behind a line of pines. I didn't want them seeing my car. As I walked up the path, the crunch of gravel under my boots carried me through years of noise, Christmas mornings filled with laughter, shouting matches over money, and the quiet talks with Grandpa when the noise had died down. When I reached the porch, I barely had time to knock. The door opened on its own. Lyle. It was my mother, Evelyn Carver. Her expression was calm, too calm, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Your father's not home, she said quickly. Then maybe you can tell me why the will disappeared. Her lips tightened. Don't start this again. You always make everything about you. I tried to smile, but it came out wrong. Grandpa made it about me. You and Dad just erased it. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment she looked down, just long enough for me to see it. A watch. The silver caught the light from the hallway, glinting like an accusation. My throat went dry. There was a small dent near the clasp, right where I'd dropped it the summer I helped Grandpa fix the porch railing. I knew that scratch like I knew my own signature. Where did you get that? I asked. She blinked. What? That watch. Grandpa's watch. He gave it to me. Oh, that. She turned her wrist casually as if she'd forgotten she was even wearing it. I found it in one of his boxes. You know how many things he had lying around? My pulse started to race. The air felt heavier. I could have sworn I heard it ticking again, I thought. But it was just my pulse reminding me what betrayal sounds like. She started adjusting the strap, pretending not to notice my stare. That tiny movement, so normal, so dismissive, cut deeper than anything she could have said. A flash of memory hit me. 10 years earlier, I was sitting with Grandpa on this very porch. The ocean was calm, the sky that kind of soft blue that makes you believe things will stay the same forever. He handed me that same watch, resting it in my palm like something sacred. This isn't about time, he'd said. It's about responsibility. When you wear it, remember that your word should tick just as steady. I'd promised him I'd keep it safe. I never imagined it would end up here, on the wrist of someone who'd help erase his final wishes. I looked at her again, the woman who'd taught me how to read, how to drive, how to keep my voice low in an argument. Now she stood in front of me wearing a lie on her wrist. You know, Mom, I said quietly, I think you just told me more than you meant to. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means Grandpa's will isn't gone. I took a step back, voice calm, steady. It's right where you all hide things you don't want me to find. Her face hardened. Don't talk to me like your father. You've always had a way of twisting things. Maybe, I said, slipping my hands into my pockets. Or maybe I finally learned it from the best. She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking down the porch steps. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look back. The sound of the ocean was louder now, waves hitting the shore like they were trying to remind me of something. Behind me, the faint ticking of that watch echoed through the open door, steady, mechanical, relentless. It followed me all the way to my car. Even time sides with them now, I muttered, starting the engine. I sat there for a while before driving off. The image of that watch burned into my thoughts. Then I pulled out my phone. On a hunch, I opened the old photo album I hadn't touched in years. There it was, a picture of Grandpa and me on the porch, both smiling. The light caught the window behind us, and in the reflection, something else shimmered faintly. A safe. I zoomed in. The same one that used to sit behind the study desk. Grandpa's safe. I hadn't thought about it in years, but I suddenly knew exactly where it was. And I knew where the key would be. That safe hadn't been opened in years, but I knew where the key was. I left the mansion just after sunset, the chill from the Atlantic settling into my jacket sleeves. Instead of heading home, I turned off the main road and drove toward the edge of the property line, where the old workshop stood. The path hadn't been used in a while, overgrown and half swallowed by the wild, but my tires still remembered the route. The shed hadn't changed, still leaning slightly to the left, still missing a few shingles near the back. I unlocked the rusted latch and stepped inside, greeted by the scent of aged wood, salt, and tools that hadn't moved since my grandfather's last breath. The bulb overhead sputtered when I flipped the switch, casting a faint yellow light across the room. Dust clung to everything, the workbench, the fishing gear, even the old blueprint rack leaning against the wall. I walked straight to the back. Beneath the work table, nailed behind the rear beam like Grandpa always said, where things stay safe, was the tin box. The lid groaned as I opened it. Inside, wrapped in a piece of torn flannel, sat the key. Brass, worn smooth from years of fingers that believed in legacy over lies. But it wasn't alone. A fresh cigarette butt lay beside it. Still smelled faintly of menthol. Grandpa never smoked. Only one person in the family did. Damon. I didn't move. I just stared at it, the truth clawing its way through my ribs. He'd been here. Recently. Maybe even the day of the funeral. He knew, I whispered. He knew I'd come back. He knew I'd look here. I clenched the key in my palm until it bit into the skin, a small pain to remind me this wasn't paranoia, it was real. A gust of wind rattled the shed's walls, pulling me out of my thoughts. I looked around the room. A faded photo sat tucked under a clamp, a picture of Grandpa in front of the workshop, arm around me, both of us covered in sawdust and sunburn. On the wall above the bench was the old construction certificate. Edward Carver Sons, 1989. Next to it, barely visible under the film of time, the corner of a document peeked from behind the frame. I tugged it free. First draft will, witness copy. My breath caught. He'd kept a copy, not the final, but a draft, enough to prove it existed. By the time I left the shed, night had fallen completely. The estate house glowed faintly in the distance, the hallway window lit like a lighthouse, but one that didn't welcome ships home. I drove back down the gravel path, circled around to the side entrance. It was 8:47 p.m. I remembered the code to the side door. Still the same. The inside of the house was mostly dark. Only the grandfather clock echoed faintly through the hall. I moved quickly but carefully through the corridor, passing the portraits lining the staircase, every Carver man staring forward like sentinels of a family name I was supposed to uphold. The office was colder than the rest of the house. It always was. The curtains were drawn, the scent of old paper and leather still heavy in the air. I turned on the small desk lamp, then pulled the painting of my father from the wall. The safe sat behind it, same as always. The key slid in smoothly. Inside were ledgers, old letters, financial records, all stacked with obsessive precision. But there, near the back, a clean rectangular space in the dust, like something had recently been removed. They already took it, I muttered. Still, something caught my eye. Taped under the bottom shelf was a blue strip of painter's tape. I peeled it off, revealing a small USB drive tucked behind it. I turned at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Then a soft voice. You shouldn't be here, Lyle. It was Mom. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed but eyes unreadable. Neither should you, I said. If you love this family. I loved this family enough to tell the truth. The silence between us wasn't just awkward. It was history, unresolved and heavy. You sound just like him, she said quietly. Maybe I finally listened. She didn't argue. She just turned and walked away. But for the first time, I wasn't sure whose side she was on anymore. I looked around the room one last time. Old photos on the shelves, graduations, birthdays, trips we'd taken and then forgotten. One frame held a family picture from when I was 13. I was cropped halfway out. Literally, cut by the frame. They can erase my name, I whispered, but not what I know. I slipped the USB drive into my pocket. It felt heavier than its size allowed. Back in my car, I plugged it into my laptop. The screen blinked. A folder opened. Legacy proof. Inside, one file. A video. Dated exactly 2 months before Grandpa died. I hesitated, then pressed play. The screen lit up. Grandpa sat at his desk, eyes straight to the camera. And then he spoke my name. I froze. The sound of my grandfather's voice pulled me back to every summer spent in that house, every lesson I thought I'd forgotten. I sat there in the driver's seat, laptop open on my knees, the pale blue glow washing over my hands. Outside, the wind howled off the cape, rattling the car, whispering through the cracks. But inside, it was just me and him. If you're watching this, Lyle, he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his fingers, it means they did what I feared they would. The camera wobbled slightly. He must have set it up himself, maybe with that same stubborn pride that built everything in this family. His face was thinner than I remembered, but his eyes, they were clear, sharp. I changed my will because you're the only one I trust to carry the Carver name with honesty, he continued. If your father or brother find this before you do, they'll destroy it. I've hidden the signed copy and the recording in separate places. Find Samuel Green. He knows what to do. He coughed hard, covering his mouth with a trembling hand, then looked straight at the camera again. And son, don't hate them. That's their curse, not yours. Then the screen went black. I didn't move. I couldn't. My chest felt too tight, my throat burning like I'd swallowed something heavy. The wind outside faded to nothing. For a second, I thought I heard the faint tick of that old silver watch in my head. He trusted me, and I let them bury his truth. The guilt came in waves, thick and quiet. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, breathing hard. The ocean sounded closer now, like it was breathing with me, slow and rhythmic. I hit play again, desperate to hear his voice one more time. That's when I saw it. A shadow. In the reflection of the glass cabinet behind him. Broad shoulders, leaning in just slightly, arms crossed. Damon. I paused the video, rewound, played it again. The same outline appeared for a fraction of a second, but I'd know that stance anywhere. My brother had been there. He'd seen the recording before me. Of course you did, I whispered. You always wanted to be one step ahead. The realization hit me all at once. Damon must have deleted the original file from Grandpa's office computer, but didn't know about this duplicate. He thought he'd erased everything. I looked down at the laptop screen, my reflection overlapping with my grandfather's frozen face. You always underestimated him, Damon, I said quietly. And now you're going to wish you hadn't underestimated me. I pulled out my phone, typing fast. To Samuel Green. I found something. Need to meet. Tomorrow morning. Confidential. I hit send before I could think twice. Then I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same tired eyes, same faint scar above my eyebrow from when Damon pushed me off the dock when we were kids. I used to look at those eyes and see weakness. Now they looked like proof that I'd survived them all. They buried me in silence, I said softly. I'll return the favor, but with truth. The drive home was long and dark. The road cut through patches of fog, headlights slicing open the night. I thought of Grandpa's words. Silence isn't surrender. He'd been right. Silence could build. It could grow teeth. Halfway home, my phone lit up. Damon. I debated ignoring it, then answered. What do you want? His voice was sharp, confident. You been snooping again, little brother? Just visiting old memories. Stay out of family business. You mean crimes? There was a pause. A breath that almost sounded like laughter, but colder. You don't want to start a war you can't win. I'm not starting one, I said evenly. I'm finishing his. The line went dead. I let the silence fill the car, then smiled for the first time in days. Not because it was funny, but because it felt inevitable. When I got home, I placed the laptop on the table and replayed the last frame again. Grandpa's eyes stared back at me, calm and knowing. I imagined what he'd say if he were here now, probably something simple like, keep your hands steady, son. Truth's only dangerous if you're scared of it. I wasn't scared anymore. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The message read, meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring what you found. Don't tell anyone. Attached below was a GPS pin, Samuel Green's office. My pulse kicked up, slow but strong. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over reply. Something about it didn't feel right, but this was the lead I'd been waiting for. I shut the laptop, pocketed the USB, and leaned back in my chair. Tomorrow, everything would change. But when I got there, Samuel Green was already dead. Rain blurred my windshield as I pulled into the lot on Tremont Street. The same lot I'd parked in before, months ago, when all this still felt like a bad memory I could outrun. Not today. Today, the parking lot glowed in red and blue pulses. 2 cruisers, 1 coroner's van, and crime scene tapes stretching across the entryway like a final warning. The law office looked too normal. Beige bricks, modest iron gate, a flickering porch light that hadn't changed since the 90s. But now there were umbrellas, latex gloves, radios crackling in low tones. A uniformed officer stepped toward me, motioning to leave. Before I could speak, a woman in plain clothes pushed past him. Sharp cheekbones, auburn hair tied tight, her badge clipped at the waist. Sir, you can't be here, she said, voice calm but curt. I had a meeting, I replied, stepping out of the car. With Samuel Green. She paused. Her eyes didn't blink. You Lyle Carver? I nodded. Come inside, she said, already turning her back. The interior was clinical, cold. Forensics walked carefully around overturned furniture. Shards of ceramic littered the carpet, likely that dog-shaped mug Samuel always used. His framed photos lay scattered across the desk. One, of him holding a yellow lab, face down. That one cracked me more than I expected. Detective Delaney kept her voice low as we stepped into the back office. Signs of forced entry, she said. Papers everywhere. Whoever came in knew what they wanted. I looked around. Filing drawers were half open, books off the shelves. His computer was gone entirely, ripped from its mount, cables dangling. What was taken? I asked, not really expecting an answer. We recovered a few USBs, but none labeled Carver or Legacy. She glanced sideways. Does that name mean something to you? I hesitated. He had one more, I said quietly. And do you have it? I did. I paused, then added, if they killed him for it, they think it's gone. Her eyes narrowed, reading me. You should be careful, she said, then stepped away to speak with another officer. I lingered near the door, not ready to leave. I looked back once more at the desk. The drawer was still slightly open. Inside, I could just make out the edge of a torn envelope. Something red smeared near the flap, maybe ink, maybe not. If Damon or Dad did this, it means they know I'm too close. Back at my apartment that evening, something felt off the moment I reached the top step. The hallway light was out, and my door ajar. I stood still, listening. No movement inside, no sounds, just silence, the kind that sinks too deep. Slowly I pushed it open. Nothing broken, nothing missing, at first glance. But then I saw the laptop. Open, awake. The folder labeled Legacy Proof was gone. In its place, a single text file sat on the desktop. You're next if you keep digging. I stared at it for a long time, not daring to open it. My heart thudded slow and hard in my ears. I didn't call the cops. I knew better. My father's reach was longer than most men's morality. He had friends in suits and uniforms, people who didn't leave paperwork behind. Instead, I sat at my desk, shaking off the fear like a wet coat. I closed the laptop and opened the drawer beneath it. Inside, a folder, just paper this time. Scanned copies of the revised will, emails from Grandpa's estate lawyer, payment logs, a few receipts for notarization services. I took out a spare USB drive, backed everything up, then another. One I'd stash at the firm, one I'd send to a friend in San Diego. And I wrote an email. Subject: to be opened if anything happens to me. I didn't sign it, just attached everything and saved it as a draft on a cloud server with encrypted access. Then I pulled out the watch. Grandpa's, still stopped, still heavy, still mine. I slipped it on. It didn't tick, but it felt like something steadied inside me when it hugged my wrist. He said, "Time tells the truth," I thought. Let's see if it's ready to speak. My phone rang. A voice I'd know anywhere. "Been snooping again, little brother?" "Damon." "I was just visiting old friends," I said. "Don't be cute, Lyle." "Why not?" "You were never good at subtle." "Stay out of this." "You mean out of the truth?" A pause. "You don't want this fight." "You already started it," I said. "I'm just finishing it." Click. He hung up. Later that night, as I sat at the kitchen counter with a cup of stale coffee, there came a knock. 3 soft raps. Measured. Not random. I stood, heart quickening. No one should know where I lived. I moved slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message: you left something behind at the office. A photo followed. Grainy, low light. It was the will. My grandfather's signature clearly visible at the bottom. I stared at it, jaw locked. But when I went to get it, the trap was already set. The Boston Harbor wind cut sharper than usual that night, pushing cold air through my coat like it knew something I didn't. I followed the GPS coordinates from the anonymous text, driving past rusted fences and shuttered storefronts until I reached the edge of an old industrial zone in Quincy. There it was. A fenced storage lot, the kind that hadn't seen a city inspector in years. One flickering streetlight hung like a tired sentinel over the cracked concrete. I killed the engine, left the lights off, and sat for a full minute, just watching. My instincts, never loud but never wrong, whispered, "It's too clean, too simple." And there it was again, right in the center of the lot. A small metal case like something out of a courtroom drama, set alone under the light. Taped across the top, Carver Family Trust, original copy. I got out, one hand inside my coat where the remote was hidden, just in case. Step by step, I crossed the lot, eyes darting between shadows and puddles. The silence wasn't right. It wasn't the peace of night. It was the pause before something broke. I crouched beside the case. Then, headlights. Bright, close, blinding. An engine cut. A car door slammed. "You should have listened, Lyle." The voice was smug, familiar. Damon. He stepped into view, sharp suit, slick smile, standing beside a black Escalade like he was posing for a campaign photo. Behind him, 2 guys I'd never seen, broad-shouldered, blank faces, the kind you pay more for silence than skill. "You went digging where you shouldn't have," he said. "I went looking for what's mine." "What's yours?" He barked a laugh. "Everything you ever touched was built by Dad. You're just a leftover who couldn't handle the pressure." I nodded toward the case. "Then why hide the will like it's stolen?" His grin faded. He snapped his fingers. The 2 men moved fast, too fast. They grabbed me, slammed me against the side of a rusted shipping container. The metal groaned under the impact. I didn't fight, not yet. That's when I saw it. Inside the case, blinking red. A camera. Live. "You're recording this?" Damon barked, stepping forward. "No," I said. "You are." I slipped my hand into my pocket and clicked the remote. The camera light blinked twice. Streaming. "I knew you'd come, Damon," I said, keeping my voice level. "You sent that text?" "No, but I answered it. With something you'll love." He blinked, confused. "That case? That conversation? Every second of this is being uploaded. Detective Delaney gets the whole package the moment the feed ends. The threats, your voice, that little grab and go just now, all of it. The hired men faltered. They looked at Damon. He didn't look back. You wouldn't do that, he said, but his voice was quieter now. You've always mistaken silence for weakness, I replied. Not tonight. His temper broke. And he stormed over, yanked the case shut, nearly crushing the camera. You think this makes you smart? No, I said. Just not scared of you anymore. He stepped closer. For a second, I thought he'd hit me. He didn't. He just stared, jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind. Grandpa was right, I said. You and Dad only care about the Carver name when it's printed on a check. That hit. He turned on his heel, barked at his men, and stormed back to the Escalade. Tires screeched. Rain kicked up behind them as they disappeared into the night, and I was alone. I waited until the taillights vanished before opening the case again. Empty, but taped inside the lid, there was a slip of yellowed paper, folded once, scrawled in my grandfather's handwriting. Not this one. Check the foundation. I scanned the lot again. Far off to the right, nearly hidden in shadows, sat an old construction trailer. The logo still faintly visible. Carver Sons Development Co. I moved toward it, heart pounding, breath clouding in the cold. At the trailer's base, where the foundation met cracked asphalt, I saw a corner loose enough to pry with my keys. I wedged it open, hands shaking. Inside the crawl space, wrapped in plastic and sealed in a metal tube, was a USB drive and a worn legal envelope, the seal unbroken, my grandfather's signature on the front. The will wasn't stolen, it was buried, just like every other truth they couldn't burn. I sat back, breath heaving. The air smelled like rust and wet cement, but all I could smell was victory, small, fragile, but real. As I stood, I felt something odd on my wrist, a sound I hadn't heard in over a decade. The faint tick of Grandpa's watch. I looked down. The second hand was moving. Guess time's back on my side, I whispered. The ticking followed me back to the car. I slid into the seat, hands still dirty, breath fogging the windshield. Pulled out my phone to text Delaney, but before I could type, a message buzzed in. You've got 24 hours before the truth kills someone else. Attached, nothing, just a sentence. I lifted my eyes to the mirror. Behind me, far off, headlights reappeared. Escalade. Again. This time, they weren't chasing the will. They were chasing me. The rain hadn't let up since before sunrise. Boston was drenched, its skyline blurred behind sheets of water, like even the city wanted to stay hidden. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I flew down the back roads near Milton, heart thudding in rhythm with the windshield wipers. The USB drive and the envelope were wrapped in a damp towel beside me. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, still there. That same black Escalade. No weaving, no honking, just steady, like it had all the time in the world to watch me fall apart. I made a sharp right onto an old service road leading into the woods near the Carver estate. The tires slipped in the mud, the back end fishtailed, but I kept it together. I killed the lights and coasted behind a line of pines, letting the car fall silent. Seconds later, the Escalade roared past the entrance. I sat there in the quiet, breath shallow, hands shaking against the wheel. The only sound was rain tapping the roof like a ticking clock. You can't outrun blood, I thought, but you can choose where to face it. I pulled back onto the road and made my way toward the old Carver mansion. The place hadn't been touched since the funeral. No one had wanted to deal with it. Too many ghosts, and not enough guilt. The driveway was flooded and overgrown, but the iron gates creaked open under pressure, just like always. The house greeted me with a silence so thick it felt like it might close its mouth around me. The oak doors resisted at first, then groaned open. The smell inside, old flowers, dust, and something beneath it all. Memory. I walked through the hall, past portraits that never looked kind, never felt warm. My shoes echoed. My childhood played out between those echoes. Dad's voice, full of control, Damon's laughter, sharp as a knife, and Grandpa, always the calm in the storm. I stepped into the study. The same desk, the same chair. The very spot where Grandpa filmed his message, the weight of it all pressed down hard. I placed the envelope on the desk and powered up the old desktop. It hummed like a tired man trying to remember why he got out of bed. The USB slipped in like it belonged there. The screen lit up with the scanned will. Edward Carver hadn't left a fortune to feed the wolves. He'd split his wealth, nearly everything, to charities, longtime employees, and a foundation in his name. Only 10% was designated for family heirs who upheld integrity. Only one name was listed. Mine. Damon's name was nowhere. Neither was our father's. There was a note attached to the file. Grandpa's voice again, this time written, "If they come for you, remember, this was never about the money. It was about who carries the name with honor." I sank into the leather chair, letting the words soak in. Rain dripped from my hair onto the old rug. For the first time since he passed, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. Then I heard it. Footsteps in the hall. I stood slowly. My heartbeat turned into thunder. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Damon's voice echoed as he stepped into the doorway, drenched, seething. His eyes locked on mine. "I didn't take anything," I said. "Grandpa gave it." "You don't get to speak his name," he snapped, stepping closer. His coat dripped onto the hardwood, leaving a trail like oil. "I never wanted any of this," I said. "But you made it a war." "You think this makes you righteous?" he growled. "You're just a stray. A disappointment Dad didn't know what to do with." I didn't flinch. "Maybe, but at least I didn't turn on my own blood." He lunged before I could finish the sentence. We slammed into the bookshelf, books tumbling around us. A picture frame shattered beside my head. The photo of us with Grandpa, long before the bitterness had eaten through everything. The glass sliced across Damon's palm, but he didn't stop. He grabbed the USB and hurled it toward the window. It bounced, hit the desk leg, and landed blinking. "You ruined everything," he shouted, voice cracked and raw. "No," I said, shoving him back. "You did that a long time ago." We grappled. No grace, no form, just years of betrayal, fists full of fury, arms soaked in grief. Finally, I managed to push him hard enough that he stumbled, hit the desk corner, and went down. He didn't get back up. The rain outside seemed to pause. I staggered to the desk. The USB was still there, light blinking rapidly. Then I saw the message on screen. Live stream. Connected to date. M. Delaney. Secure server. The air in the room seemed to stretch like it knew everything had shifted. My phone vibrated in my pocket. "Lyle," Delaney's voice came through. "Step away from him. We have everything." I looked down at Damon, still breathing, stunned, face pale against the polished wood. I stepped back. Then my gaze drifted to my wrist. The old watch ticked again, perfectly. "You were right, Grandpa," I whispered. "Time told the truth." Damon blinked up at the monitor, the will still open, his name nowhere to be seen. "You wanted loyalty," I said softly. "Now you'll have it. To the law." Flashing red and blue lights spilled through the tall windows. Doors slammed. Footsteps rushed in. Delaney entered first, eyes sharp but calm. She looked at me, then at Damon, then the screen. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "It doesn't feel like winning," I replied. "That's because you're not like them." I nodded slowly. As they cuffed Damon and let him out, I looked once more at the painting above the fireplace. Grandpa, standing beside the old workbench, not smiling, but proud, always proud. I turned and walked out into the rain. Behind me, the ticking of the watch faded with every step, like time was gently stepping out of the room too. But I didn't know the hardest part wasn't over. Forgiveness always comes last. It's been 2 months. Winter melted quietly into a pale, reluctant spring. Boston looks softer now, almost shy. The wind still has teeth, but the edge is dulled. I spend most mornings on the pier behind my small apartment staring out at the harbor. Not thinking, just being. Damon's in prison, fraud, obstruction, a few other charges tacked on for flair. Dad didn't end up behind bars, but that man lost everything louder than any cell door could slam. His name's not printed on any trucks anymore. His office sits empty, locked behind federal seals and dust. But peace? That's a different thing entirely. I go to work now with my hands, not with strategy. A small construction crew out of Dorchester. They don't know the Carver name. They just know I show up early, drink bad coffee, and haul lumber without complaint. Most just call me Lyle. That alone feels like a kind of salvation. At night, I still read Grandpa's last letter, the one no one else saw. It's tucked in my drawer, the paper soft from wear. One line always hits the hardest. If you ever feel alone, remember, integrity has a price, but it buys peace no one can steal. Some nights I still ask myself if the price was too high. One Thursday afternoon, the rain was gentle for once, more like a whisper than a storm. I was halfway through fixing the old cabinet hinge that had been creaking since I moved in, when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it. And there she was, my mother. She looked smaller somehow. Shoulders drawn in, eyes swollen like she hadn't been sleeping right. Her hands clutched a handbag that looked older than the memories between us. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," she said quietly. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." I didn't say anything, just stepped aside. She moved slowly like she wasn't sure if the floor beneath her would hold. Sat at the tiny table by the window, glanced around the room like it didn't match whatever version of me she remembered. "You always liked simple things," she murmured. "Your father never understood that." I leaned against the counter. "No, he didn't." She nodded once, then pulled an envelope from her bag. Inside were photos, old birthdays, Christmas mornings, me in paper hats and awkward grins. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else. "You were a good boy," she said. I knew that. I think deep down I always did, but I stayed quiet. I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family together. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Silence isn't love, Mom. It's just permission." Her lips trembled. "I know. And I'm sorry I realized it too late." She didn't cry. Not fully. Just sat there, eyes shining, shoulders rising and falling like she was holding back a sea. I didn't yell. Didn't list the ways she hurt me just by standing behind Dad all those years. Didn't ask where she was when I was kicked out of the funeral. We just sat. The fridge humming, a gull calling from somewhere beyond the window. When she finally stood to leave, she reached out and gently touched my cheek. "Your grandfather would have been proud of you." And for once, I believed her. It didn't sound like pity. It sounded like truth. After she left, I sat alone for a while. No TV, no music, just the clock ticking and the sound of cars passing outside. Eventually, I walked over to the shelf and picked up the old photo of our family, the one with the cracked glass. I wiped the dust off and hung it back on the wall. The crack didn't bother me anymore. It was honest. That night, I took a walk along the pier. The watch still ticked softly on my wrist. For the first time since Grandpa gave it to me, I opened the back of the case. I'd never thought to check it before. Inside, engraved so small I nearly missed it, were the words, "To the one who keeps time honest." I smiled. It finally made sense. The watch stopped again that night, somewhere between midnight and morning, but this time it felt like it was supposed to. I stood by the water, cool air brushing past my face, picked up a pebble and tossed it into the harbor. The ripples stretched wide, slow, deliberate. "They called it family loyalty," I murmured. "But loyalty without love is just control, and love without truth. That's not family. That's captivity." The water was quiet, calm. "Maybe forgiveness isn't about letting them back in," I whispered. "It's about letting yourself step out." I turned to walk home, the old boards of the pier creaking underfoot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Detective Delaney. "Case closed." "You did good, Lyle." I smiled. Small, quiet, but real. Then another buzz. This one from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but Edward Carver changed my life years ago. Thank you for protecting his legacy." I stopped and looked back out at the water. The wind carried just enough salt to remind me I was still here, still standing. Turns out the inheritance wasn't money after all. It was finally being free.